In the coming days, Putin will have to take a big call. After Ukraine, what? How many Russian soldiers stay back? How many remain in Belarus? And most importantly, does he push on? That last question is a complicated one. If Vladimir Putin does march forward, what are his options? Let me pull up the map for you. To the east and south, you have 5 nations: Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova. The first 4 are NATO members. If you attack them, you attack NATO. So chances are Putin will not take that risk, or so we hope, which leaves Moldova. Ukraine and Moldova share a long border, around 1,222 kilometers long. If Vladimir Putin wants to, he can train his guns on Moldova. A new leak indicates this plan. And guess who leaked it? Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, aka Putin's new best friend. On Tuesday, Lukashenko convened his Security Council, the agenda to discuss Russia's battle plans. Lukashenko arrived with 2 props, a large map of Eastern Europe and a pointing stick. The whole thing looks straight out of Hollywood, but we are not going to focus on the theatrics. We are focusing on Lukashenko's map. Take a look.
Атомная станция – это страшнее ядерного оружия. Торрент-2, которые мы новые закупили, называют точки. Они, наверное, не секретные для натовцев, они все видят. Мы поставим С-400, который будет находиться чуть западнее Минска. 1000 раненых прибыли в Гомель. Кричат наши беглые и прочее.
Scary, isn't it? Would Putin really attack Moldova? We can think of 2 reasons why he would. Number 1, Moldova was part of the Soviet Union. Until 2009, their government was sympathetic towards Moscow. The current government, not so much. If Putin really wants to revive the Soviet Empire, Moldova may seem attractive. And reason number 2, it could be a relatively easy mission. Why do we say that? For starters, Moldova is not part of NATO. So even if Russia attacks, NATO will not respond. Plus, their army is not as big as Ukraine's, just 6,000 odd soldiers. That's it. That's all Moldova has. But what will really excite Putin is this: Transnistria. It is a breakaway region on the Moldova-Ukraine border. Now, globally, it is recognized as part of Moldova, but for all practical purposes, it is independent. Their own government, their own army, their own parliament. Why will this excite Putin? Because this region, Transnistria, is pro-Russian. Russia has 2,000 soldiers stationed here. Add to that 10,000 soldiers loyal to the rebel government. Put together, they can overpower Moldova. But will Putin give that order? A lot depends on how the Ukraine invasion ends. How much longer will Kiev hold out? What kind of insurgency will emerge? Basically, it depends on how busy the Russian army will be. Another fact to consider is the blowback. Invading one country is risky enough. Invading 2 should be unimaginable in 2022. Countries that are backing Russia may have to reconsider. Countries on the fence may rethink. Plus, there will be more sanctions. Putin may end up with 2 puppet regimes, but no money to run them. Does that mean he will stop at Ukraine? Last week, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was asked the same question. Let me tell you what Blinken said in his reply, and I'm quoting: Putin has made it clear that he would like to reconstitute the Soviet Empire. Short of that, he'd like to reassert a sphere of influence around neighboring countries that were once part of the Soviet bloc. And short of that, he'd like to make sure that all of these countries are somehow neutral. So the US does not rule it out, which explains why NATO is on high alert. They are beefing up their eastern flank. We're seeing more soldiers, more fighter jets, more artillery being deployed. You could call it an insurance policy. Putin fooled the West in 2014. He fooled them again this year. So nobody can be 100% sure of his intentions, except maybe this man, the president of Belarus. He's Putin's number 1 ally at the moment. It's a classic quid pro quo. Lukashenko needs Russian support to stay in power. We saw the massive anti-government protest in Belarus last year, in the capital Minsk. Without Russian support, Lukashenko's position is shaky. And what does Putin get in return? A new satellite state, a staging ground for his soldiers, and I'm not just talking about this war, I'm talking about the future. Belarus has agreed to host Russian nuclear weapons, which means more NATO cities will now be on Russia's nuclear radar. But that's in the future. Right now, Vladimir Putin needs Belarus for two things. A, to be a fake neutral state. Russia has to hold peace talks with Ukraine somewhere, and that somewhere is Belarus. And B, to supplement Russian forces. Ukraine says Belarusian soldiers are already fighting against them. The US says the official deployment may come soon. Either way, Lukashenko's contribution has been huge. He helped Putin open a third front to the north. And this help may keep Lukashenko in power, but at what cost? Western nations are imposing sanctions on Belarus too. Their athletes have been suspended by sporting bodies. Russia may have the financial depth to stay afloat, but Belarus does not.